thrill seekers. That was a little taste of my song, I Am a Whale. That was the final song on the first Dementia 13 album. And I put the whole video up on this channel already, and I'll put some more of the video at the end of this video if you want to hear the rest of the song. Okay, so people have asked me, one person asked me a question about what is the Buddhist understanding of memory. And I thought, that's an interesting question. I don't know. And so I did some research on it, and I thought I'd present to you my research like a little book report here on this video channel. So what I did at first was I looked up what I could find about what Dogen had to say about memory. Now, Dogen has a lot of chapters in Shobogenzo that talk about mind, but not much about memory specifically. And the one place I found him talking about memory where he mentions memory in passing is in Dharma Hall Discourse number 323 from Dogen's extensive record, Eihei Koroku. And since it's short, I'm going to read this to you. But it doesn't really have that much to do with memory, but the fact that it doesn't say that much about memory is sort of telling. So that's why I'm going to read it to you. He says, "An ancient said, 'This very mind, this very Buddha.' Now there are only a few who can understand this. Although he said, 'This very mind,' it is not the first 5 consciousnesses, or the 6th, 8th, or 9th consciousnesses, or the various elements of the mind. It is not chitta, the mind of grasses and trees, or the mind as the heart essence. Excluding all of these, what mind is there that we can call this very mind? It is not thinking, knowing, memory, or sensation, not views or understanding, not spiritual knowledge or clarified knowledge. Arriving at such a ground where we understand it is not any of these kinds of mind, who can fathom this very mind, this very Buddha? There were more than 80 good teachers who were disciples of Mazu, but only Zen Master Ruhui of Dongshi Temple in Hunan understood the meaning of this very mind, this very Buddha. Why do I say this? After Mazu Daiji left the world, this teacher Dongshi Ruhui always grieved that Mazu's students continued to ceaselessly recite and memorize the saying, 'This very mind, this very Buddha.' He would say, 'Where does Buddha dwell that could be called this very mind? The mind is like the painter of the world, but you call it this very mind.' Finally, the teacher Ruhui said to the assembly, 'Mind is not Buddha, wisdom is not the way. The sword is long gone, yet you are cutting notches in the boat.' After that time, people called Dongshi Temple the Cave of Zen. The meaning of this very mind, this very Buddha is like this. I sincerely implore you not to be demented and confused." So my band was Dementia 13, so don't be demented and confused. Now, I'm going to read you the footnote, which will lead me into some of the other stuff I want to tell you. There's 2 big footnotes in this, and I'll read them to you. Here we go. These various consciousnesses, these 5 consciousnesses and things he refer to the Yogachara theory that includes the 5 senses as the first 5 consciousnesses. So seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching, feeling, right? The normal 5 senses. It's 5 senses. And the mind faculty observing mind objects, i.e. thoughts, as the 6th sense. So it's not the 6th sense in the sense of that movie with what's the guy's name? The guy from that TV show with what's her name in it? Anyway, and the 6 consciousnesses. Okay. The 8th consciousness, or alaya vijnana in Sanskrit, is the repository of all experiences and resulting dispositions, both wholesome and unwholesome, which can be strengthened or weakened depending on our conduct. The 7th consciousness, manas in Sanskrit, not mentioned here by Dogen, is the egoistic faculty of human consciousness that distinguishes self from other and objectifies the world. This 7th consciousness is not likely to be mistaken for Buddha, as it may be considered the source of delusion. The basic text for the 8 consciousnesses is the 30 verses of Vasubandu, and it tells you which translations to go look for. And then the footnote continues, the ninth consciousness expounded especially in Shingon or Vajrayana Buddhism, aka Tibetan Buddhism, described in Vajra Samadhi Sutra, is the transformed and purified eighth consciousness. So it's basically the same as the eighth consciousness, aka Alaya Vijnana, only transformed and purified. The various elements of mind. Literally, the various dharmas of mind refers to the Abhidharma, psychological teachings of the variety of component elements of reality, most of them mental qualities. And that other word that he uses, chitta, is not Tarzan's monkey friend or chimpanzee friend. Chitta is the Sanskrit term that refers generally to the human mind and all its aspects. The mind of grasses and trees and the mind as the heart essence are given by Dogen as the Sanskrit terms hridaya or kirada and hridaya or irada. These are aspects of mind delineated near the very beginning of the chapter Awakening the Mind in the Tendai text Mohei Jiguan by Tendai founder Jihi. See certain translations. Most of Dogen's leading disciples to whom he was speaking these Dharma Hall discourses had also been Tendai monks like Dogen and would have known these technical terms. And he refers to these in the Shobo Genzo essay Hotsubo Daishin, Arousing the Bodhi Mind. See Nishijima and Cross, Book 3. In that passage, Dogen says that bodhicitta, the mind directed toward awakening, arises through using the mind of thinking and knowing, or citta. The mind of grasses and trees, hridaya, refers to life force as seen via ideas of Buddha nature or of Tathagata Garbha, the world of the womb of the Buddhas. Mind as the heart essence, or hridaya, refers to the heart or core. That's all very confusing, and I'm going to confuse you even more when it comes to memory, because he referred to the Yogachara concept of mind, and I brought you some visual aids. This is a little chart of the mind according to the Yogachara way of thinking of things. And as you can see, we have the first five consciousnesses, or first six consciousnesses, which are the normal five senses as five consciousnesses, then the sixth sense, which is thinking, then the seventh, which is manas, and the eighth, which is alaya vijnana, which is the storehouse consciousness. So that's the way they think of mind. And to get you even more confused when it comes to memory, we can look at this. This is a diagram of the alaya vijnana according to the Yogachara school. This gets really complicated. Maybe if you're crazy enough, you can take a screenshot of that. But as you can see, memory is included in there. Where is it? It's right in there. It's in the second thing, right after desire, resolve, memory, concentration, knowledge. It's in there. And it is inside of alaya vijnana. But they include in alaya vijnana all the other consciousnesses, so it gets really confusing. So that's kind of my message. If I have one, if you want to understand memory in terms of Buddhism, the deal is it's really confusing. So, basically, it goes like this. Memory, according to sort of contemporary science, as far as I've been able to figure, which is, I didn't really look a whole lot of this up, but the basic understanding, the one I grew up with, is that memory is stored in your brain. So we don't know exactly where it is. We know that the hippocampus seems to have a lot to do with it, because there was this famous incident, I think it happened in the 1950s, where this guy who had a lot of seizures had his hippocampus removed, because back in those days they didn't know exactly what the hippocampus did, but these doctors thought that the hippocampus was causing his seizures, and that if they removed it, he would stop having seizures. And I guess he stopped having seizures, but he also stopped being able to remember things. So that led to a whole lot of studies about how the hippocampus works in terms of memory. But as far as I could tell in doing a little bit of research about it yesterday, they still don't know exactly where memory is stored in the brain, but the thinking goes that memory is stored in the brain. Well, it turns out that this idea that memory is stored inside the brain is not all that new. The ancient Indians had that idea too. The idea was a little bit more vague back then, but here's one of the books I consulted. This is Indian Buddhist Theories of Persons by James Durlinger. I just found this at a place called the Last Bookstore in downtown Los Angeles one day and thought, no, that sounds interesting. It's a translation of Vasubandu's Refutation of the Theory of Self, and it happens to have a big long chapter on memory and Vasubandhu's understanding of memory. Vasubandhu was one of these great Indian scholars and one of the founders of what became Yogachara. But here's the part that I thought was kind of interesting. And he is refuting the theory of the Vaisikas. Now, I didn't go into all this details about who the Vaisikas are, but my feeling is the Vaisikas, there was sort of a materialist philosophy that was popular in India for a long time, even in ancient India. This is a proto-materialist philosophy, and it sounds to me like this is kind of something, either this is one of the proto-materialist philosophies or something kind of related to that. And here's their idea. Their idea is that memory arises from a particular kind of contact between a self, Atman, and an internal organ, which they call manas, which is the same as the word that the Buddhists use for that seventh consciousness, the ego consciousness. But they identify manas as an internal organ, which I would say probably the internal organ they're referring to is the one inside your head, and depends on the awareness of a memory impression that stimulates its occurrence. What is remembered is an object previously experienced in some way, and the memory of the object itself may give rise to recognition, inference, desire, aversion, or another memory. A self, which is an owner or possessor of such mental states, is the agent that uses a memory impression to perform the action of remembering the object. So, the deal is, these guys insisted against Vasubandhu. So these guys were the anti-Vasubandhu guys. They insisted that the fact that we can remember things proves that there is a self, okay? So the fact that when I was, I don't know how old, 3 years old or 5 years old, I learned 1 + 1 is 2, and that I'm 58 years old now and I still remember 1 + 1 is 2, means that there is a self who is consistent for, let's say I learned it when I was 4 years old because the math's easier. So for 54 years, there has been a self who is consistent, and it proves the existence of a self, a personal self, that is me. And what Vasubandhu is trying to do in his refutation of the theory of self is to prove against this theory that you don't need to prove, or you don't need to have a personal self in order, among other things, to account for memory. And if I understand it correctly, his logic goes something like this, and I'm probably butchering it, but I read this 2 or 3 times. Last night I read it once again, and these things are brain twisters. That's what I'll tell you. If you want to have a happy life, don't read books like this, because they will just twist your brain and confuse you. I tell you, if you think Dogen is confusing, try reading something like this. To me, this is way more confusing than Dogen. But near as I could figure it, it works like this. And this is me putting my own analogy on top of the analogy that I read in this book. So, take it with a grain of salt or whatever. You know how in the atmosphere, we look at the atmosphere and we just see an air. Well, actually, we don't see much of anything. It's invisible to us. We just, it's invisible. Or to take something we can actually see, we look at the ocean and we just see a bunch of water. Well, ship captains know, and meteorologists and people who study water, oceanographers, maybe meteorologists too, people who study water know that if you actually look at the ocean, there's actually currents in the ocean. You could actually say that there's something a little bit like rivers running through the ocean that you could actually, and I think they actually have mapped these, right? So it's something like that. There is a current running through the ocean, and you could say that if a whale, to tie it into the song from this morning, if a whale started swimming in one of these ocean currents over here, and then 400 miles later he's still swimming in the same ocean current way over there, the current is just part of the ocean. It doesn't prove that there's a separate independent self there. It's just a current within the ocean. And that's kind of Vasubandu's contention, that what we are not selves that are sort of solid things that exist, as an individual thing, but that we are currents within reality. And the fact that we have memories only proves that there is a current. There is a current in reality called provisionally Brad Warner that existed from 1964 and still exists in the year 2023. And because of that, I have certain memories that go back to probably to 1964, and I can and this Brad Warner can kind of access those memories because it's part of that stream, but it doesn't prove the existence of a single solid self. And as far as where these memories are stored, they would be stored in that storehouse consciousness, that alaya vijnana, and the alaya vijnana is not. It's not, as far as I've been able to deal with in my study of this, it's not really identified as being in any place. So the alaya vijnana doesn't exist in this 3 pound or however many pounds of hamburger in your head. The alaya vijnana is something less specified than that. And it's a kind of a universal thing. So the memory is actually stored not anywhere. It's somewhere like that. So to say that memory is stored in your brain would be like saying that, well, it would be like thinking that if we think of it like those old-fashioned kind of TVs, like I used to have when I was a kid. If you think that if you remove the tube from the TV and the picture doesn't work anymore, you might incorrectly conclude that, the picture that I saw on the screen was stored in this tube, because if I take out the tube from the TV, there's no picture on the TV, but if I put the tube back in the TV, the picture is there. So the picture must be stored in the tube, same way as if you remove part of the brain and the memory doesn't work. But if you were smarter, you'd realize that the picture that you see on the TV is actually coming from outside of the TV and being processed by the tube. The idea, I think, the Buddhists would put forth is that, the brain is an important part of what makes memory happen, but it's just part of processing the memory. It's not where the memory is. The memory isn't in the brain. Something like that. Okay, that went on way too long. So I'm going to stop there. If you want to donate to me doing more research like this and making long videos about where memory is in Buddhism, you can go to the URL that you're seeing on the screen below, which is hardcorezen.info/donate. That is hardcorezen.info/donate. There you will find links to my PayPal and my Patreon accounts. Those are my main and usually only ways of making a living, and I appreciate your support. But as always, you don't got to support me if you don't want to support me. We will see you next time, because this is offered for free, sorry. And we will see you next time. Have a good time all the time. See you later. Bye. Okay, there's Ziggy. This whole time that I've been doing this long video on memory, he's been sleeping on the couch. One of these days I gotta get some action shots of him, but there he is. See you, Ziggy.